Welcome, digital golfers, to the first episode of Custom Clubhouses, a short series of interviews with some of the best clubhouse designers in PGA TOUR 2K21. I am joined by a fantastic designer called Babybull, and we are going to talk about his phenomenal clubhouses and environments on Ilinalta and Dripstone Falls. In these interviews, we're covering everything from the first concept to the last details of the actual clubhouse designs. So let's dive right in. Babybull, I'm going to call you Michael from here on because that's your actual name. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain. I enjoy doing what I do, and I'm glad you're making this little video series.
Michael, we'll be looking at two of your published courses. We're starting off with Ilinalta, talking about rocks. There's a lot of rocks here, and you're known for that. Tell me first, what's the story behind this course? Because I read somewhere that the environment was inspired by another game, Skyrim.
Yeah, the environment was primarily based around Skyrim-ish or Lord of the Rings style fantasy courses. That was essentially what I was going for when it comes to the environment.
Yeah.
For the most part, especially the waterfall castles.
Is fantasy courses a big thing for you? I mean, do you prefer it over regular, regular courses?
Yeah, I enjoy fantasy courses for the most part. That's why I kind of consider myself more of an arcade golf course designer, more than just a standard golf course designer. I don't really have a lot of the skills that a lot of these guys that are definite fans of, golden age architecture have. So I kind of tend to lean more into the fantasy style stuff because that's a little bit more forgiving on the side of realism. And that allows me to be a lot more creative too with the stuff that I do.
Yeah. So we're looking at the course from the sky right now. It looks like a regular golf course. It has a little bit of a, I want to say, Augusta feel it to it, with the trees and the mulch and everything. So tell me, did this start out as a regular golf course, or how do you start an idea like this?
This golf course definitely started off more fantasy as opposed to some of my other courses. Tend to start one direction and I veer another halfway through the creation process, I would say. This one I kind of knew from the beginning. I wanted to kind of get goofy, quote unquote, with some of the fantasy elements. And one of the first things that popped into my head was that Lord of the Rings, Skyrim style castle with, waterfalls everywhere. So I wanted to have it to where the clubhouse was viewable from the 9th and 18th greens. And then as I was designing from that point going forward, I kind of thought that the rest of the course was lacking a little bit compared to those last two holes. So that's why I jumped over to the idea of saying, okay, well, how about I have a clubhouse and a waterfall in view of almost every single shot during your round. And that's what kind of led to having them in so many different areas.
Yeah, so we're looking at that main clubhouse right now. I think this is the 9th and the 18th right here. So this was the original idea, but then the rest of the course looked too regular, you say?
Yeah. The rest of the course just kind of seemed like a standard golf course. Didn't really have anything that was, I guess you could say, eye candy in the same sense as those 9th and 18th holes.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't really have it to where, the entire course is, dominated by just the views of those two holes, and kind of give people something to look at for the rest of the round as well.
Yeah. Definitely important. So how much of the idea for this clubhouse was drawn maybe in a sketchbook before you actually started building it in the designer? Because it takes a lot of planning, I guess, to make this.
I would say that I don't really do much in the form of drawing or sketching. It's more just whatever I can kind of see in my head. Like that was essentially what you're looking at with that big clubhouse is that view I kind of had in my head, and I thought, how can I just recreate that in the game? And then it just did really take my time doing stuff in game. That it's not really something that I would say I have like an artistic talent like most standard people have that call themselves artists. I would say I'm more of just a digital golf course creative person more than an artist.
Yeah, okay. And so I just jumped back into the designer to kind of show people how many separate items we're actually looking at here. I want to go into the technique a little bit here. You're obviously known for your crazy rock work that you do, and combined with the waterfalls here. First question, and it's a pretty obvious one. But how much time does it take you to create all this, like for this clubhouse?
It takes a little bit of time. It's more of like I said, once I get the vision in my head of what I'm going to do, every step I take is pretty methodical. I can usually knock out courses or ideas pretty quickly once I get started on them, because even though it kind of seems like it's creative and different. It's actually pretty standard application of the tools that even like realistic designers use to do standard courses. So I would say that the deviation between what I do and what a standard person would do for a standard course doesn't necessarily have much difference especially in the time frame. It's just more about just being patient.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I discussed earlier when I did a video on creating skylines. You want to create a place that is like that you can actually visit. I want to say. So, for instance, here you have that patio. There's some stairs to go up, and there's an entrance that is like reachable. But at a certain point, it becomes more visual than an actual place that needs to be like that. You need to be able to walk into. Is that something that you think about too here? I can obviously see that this, for instance, would be an entrance that you don't use necessarily. From where does it become something that is just like more of a two-dimensional visual than an actual playable area?
I would say the main thing I think about when it comes to what people are seeing is what they see from their standard golf shot positions, because most of the people that play this game are on console and they don't really have the ability to do the F10, F11 PC trick and fly around
Yeah.
and take a look at stuff. So I kind of focus on the areas that they're going to be seeing. And so I do have some of those, accessible elements as far as what people would expect from a location if they actually wanted to be there. I try to put those in, but primarily in view of where most golf shots will be played from. There are some other guys that I've seen that really go above and beyond to make, a course look accessible from a realistic point of view. But yeah, I guess my perspective is more of just keeping the work just done in areas that can be seen by a majority of the players of the game.
Yeah, yeah. I can see Chris has joined us as well. Hello, Chris. Welcome. Thanks, everyone in chat, for joining and watching this video. Please do ask questions to Michael if you want to know about some of the stuff that he's created here. I have another question for you, because you use a lot of these prefab buildings. You put them together so they look like one. For a starting designer, for a beginning designer, what are some things you need to take into account when you do that?
I would say just kind of look into levels of windows is something I always pay attention to. Like, because I want it to kind of seem like if I combine buildings, I don't want windows to kind of look like they're on like a half floor. So I try to make it to where if I do line up two buildings, I make it seem like, you have one standard floor on the bottom of the building. And then, the next floor has its own level, as opposed to, combining them, like I said, and if they're one's halfway up, the other, it kind of throws my eye off a little bit. So
Yeah.
the more I can make them look like a standard building, the better in that sense.
What's the backstory of this course?
The backstory, I would say, is more of me just trying to be a little bit goofy, I guess you could say. I didn't really want to be taken too seriously because, like I said, my roots are more from an arcade-ish golf design standpoint.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of have that appeal of like it being something that was just kind of fun to play and fun to look at. And then if I could make it playable and add some decent strategy elements in there to make it worth playing more than one round, that was a bonus.
So let's move on to another course of yours. Brooks is asking what was the object meter for this course. It says right in the corner there, it's 93.2%, which I think some people will be surprised about that you didn't fill the meter up right to 100%.
Yeah, I don't always fill the meter up. That's something that the game does kind of put a limitation on you. But I've also noticed that sometimes, since I use a lot of waterfalls, the closer I get to that 100% mark, the more it lags on consoles, especially like for the Xbox guys.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that's definitely something to take into account. I just fired Ilinalta up again. Let's go to Dripstone Falls, your more recent course that has a clubhouse that is just amazing in all kinds of ways. You sent me the course file for this, I think this morning or yesterday. I went into this in the designer and I just checked it out, and it's. I mean, I played the course and I thought it was awesome. And then I checked out like all the different objects that you put in, and this must have been so much work.
Yeah, when it comes to this one, the thing I like to do is I use what I call my I don't know what to call it, like scaffolding approach. So just so that the newer designers know that whenever you first put an object onto the course, before you actually place it, it's locked to the ground. That's why you can move it around and it'll go up and down with the hills. But if you actually if you raise or lower it, it actually loses that lock.
Mm-hmm.
And then that allows you to actually move the ground up and down around the object and it not affect the object anymore. So the camera, though, is still always locked to the ground. The camera, whenever you move it around in the game, is locked to the area of the ground you're looking at.
Yeah.
So whenever I build something like this that's more vertical, you actually can move the ground up. And when you move the ground up, it allows you to get closer in. Like for each of those steps, I would actually move the ground up a little bit around the entire tree. So at points, that entire tree was covered by ground, and you couldn't see anything except for the very top. And I had to use the same idea for those bushes that look like the foliage of the tree. And so that allows you to zoom in real close with the camera to certain areas to do detailed work. And then, when you're done, you can pull the ground back down.
I'm just showing people in chat what you're talking about. This is actually completely new to me because this is such an annoying thing in the designer when you're going up and you're like you said. Wow. I was gonna ask you, how do you do this? Because how can you be so precise with all those steps and everything when the camera is so well out of place, I want to say. But that's how you do it. Okay, let's move the ground back down because we want to take a look at this clubhouse from top to bottom. So we touched on those steps now. So let me ask you, how many steps are in this clubhouse?
I actually didn't even count. The one of the things that was fun about this course was this is kind of like a follow-up to the collaboration I did with Victory Lane Sports and Terry Grayson on Bull Kraken. And if you look at Bull Kraken, I actually almost made the game crash several times with the number of steps that I have throughout that entire course.
Oh, really?
It got to the point to where the game would lag extremely bad every time I would go just to select the step object. So I felt that it was going to break the course file after a while. This course was, like I said, was kind of like the follow-up to that. So I was in such a mode of putting steps everywhere that it didn't even really faze me to just kind of jump in and start, laying a couple hundred of them down. And so, yeah, I would say there's several hundred in that course, in that clubhouse, as opposed to like bull cracking, where I was pushing close to like 5,000,
Wow.
5,000 plus.
Yeah. Celtic Wolf is saying that's a great way to do the detail work. I think you're referring to lowering and raising the ground. The Kraken sinking the ship was freaking awesome, says Chris here. Okay, so how much planning does it take to make a clubhouse like this? Because, well, you touched on that scaffolding way of doing things, but you need to know upfront you need to have something of a plan on how high and where everything is going to go, right? Or do you just start and see where things go?
So the idea with this one was, I would say it goes more to, I guess you could say, Sir Lassie, actually, in the chat. He was somebody that did a course with A. Granger, and that collaboration, he actually had his own little clubhouse in a little tree house. And when I saw that tree house, I was like, oh, I know that I could probably take something, from that idea and just make it like epic in scale. And so the first thing I did was I went and I found a tree that didn't have any foliage on it in the game, one of the dead trees. And then I made that tree as large as I could in the game. And that kind of gave me the skeleton, I guess you could say, for how I was going to build around it. And that gave me then ideas to then look around and look for certain platform areas that would be the best to have, a building sit and be unhindered by branches. And then once I got those different tiers built, I put the houses on. And then once I had the houses on, then I started focusing more on the foliage, the foliage are actually just big bush objects themselves. And so I put those on individually. And then once I kind of filled that out, then I started focusing on the steps and then the detailed little objects around it after that.
Yeah. You did such a great job here. And that foliage, obviously when you get very close, you can see that it's the bushes that are just floating. But from a distance, it just looks so awesome. Let's say, so how do you choose your items? I mean, for instance, those bushes, do you just see what works, or do you have specific items that you use a lot?
I look for objects that have good rendering from a distance. That's usually one of the first things I do whenever I try to do something that's going to be seen from a long way away. So, for example, on this course, I knew that I was going to have like a large vertical fantasy element. That was my idea from the beginning. Before I even knew I was going to make a tree house, I kind of thought I want something that can be seen from the multiple holes throughout the course at varying distances. So I had to get something that was good from a rendering point of view, so that wherever you were looking at it on the course, you could actually see the foliage. And so that was my first thing, is I took certain objects out, certain tree objects, and had them kind of up there, and then would zoom out from a distance to see how it looked. And then once I saw how it looked from all those different areas, I kind of settled on the bush that I chose because of the way it looks from a distance, I guess you could say. And
Yeah.
that was my methodology behind the choice of that bush itself.
And let's just see which bush that was. Just for the people in chat who want to know, or the people watching the video. How can we select that? Swap object, I guess? No. Oh, wait. We can just go into place objects and look up and see what you placed here. So there's just there's just four trees, different trees on this course. So it's this bush, people. This tiny little bush.
Yeah, on the entire course. Yeah.
That's amazing to just have four different types of trees on the course. So, and this is just an enormous version of that that tree that has no foliage. It's really amazing. Celtic Wolf asks, did you ever go back and delete a lot of steps because they weren't lining up correctly?
No, the steps, like I said, like I had so much practice with placing steps on bull cracking. You kind of get to more of a mathematical approach. So when you're placing a step, you don't really have many options, right? You can click, I think, like up or and it will lock the step to the step beneath it, or you could press like down and it'll lock to an adjacent step. So the only other thing you can do is rotate at that point, left and right. And what I've learned specifically was I learned that if I do like a certain number, like I can do like 5 to 9 clicks and right or left, and then I've learned the curvature of that if you do that every single time. So some of those curves you see on there, I used 9 clicks, the ones that are real sharp, and then the ones that I wanted to have more of a gentle curve to them, I used about 5, or like 3 to 5 is a good slow curve. And then if you really want to torque it, that's when you amp it up to 9 clicks. And
Yeah.
then, so like I said before, like even though it looks like creative and organic, everything I do is very, very methodical. And that was my approach, was just learning the different turning radiuses, I guess you could say, of the numbers of clicks, right or left with the steps. And then once you get that down, it kind of is pretty easy, and you can see the curve in your mind, I guess you could say, before you actually lay it down. So I would say I didn't delete any steps in this treehouse. I deleted a lot of steps in bull cracking, and those were hard lessons learned. So after that, going forward, I just kind of knew what to do.
So okay, and so you're talking about the curve of the steps, but then there is getting from this level to that level. And I mean, at what point do you decide, okay, now we're going from path to stairs, back to path, back to stairs? Because is there a way to mathematically know how far up you have to go?
Yeah, you could if you wanted to. One thing I would recommend if anybody does try to do it is to just go directly from one level to the other using the clicking up. So how you can lock to an object with each step. If you do that, it'll give you an idea of how many steps up you're going to need to go before you get to that next object, and then just delete all those steps, and then go back and then do add the curve as you kind of want it to go. That was a lesson I learned making bull cracking. So on this course, one of the things that I was also having to contend with were the branches of the tree themselves. So I didn't want the branches actually sticking through any of the walkways, or any of the foliage really obstructing the walkways. And so I would basically have to plan my curves to go around so you could see that you could walk up it without like hitting your head on a branch or going through foliage, is what I was kind of envisioning in my head. And so I also had to go from multiple sides. So if you look, the steps are actually on both sides of the treehouse, and so like I wanted to say that if you lived on one side of the tree or you lived on one area, you wouldn't want to have to walk up just one way. You would want to have like a shortcut to get to your house or whatever. And that was one of the things I kind of thought of while I was doing it. And again, it was more of just looking at one level and then going to the next level and saying, okay, what's the easiest way to get to that level?
Yeah.
And then, like I said before, it's more of just trial and error on earlier courses that made this one a lot easier.
Yeah, so experience comes in handy there. Serliosi says that my treehouse was a bit smaller. That is right, and also says I would always do that by feeling. So there's a little bit of a difference there. It's a little bit more of a mathematical approach. I think accessibility, like you said earlier, here plays a big part in how realistic this totally unrealistic, let's be honest, treehouse looks. Because you can actually get everywhere, and it goes even down to the smallest detail. Here, the boat that actually gives you access to the island. Let's not forget about some of the other objects that are in here. So these must be the Dripstone Falls, right?
Yeah, the Dripstone Falls. Just so everybody in chat knows, that this course actually started off as like more of like an English countryside style course, and was going to be very realistic with very minimal water. And the only thing I was going to have was that, a giant tree house right in the middle of it. And then about halfway through designing it, I think somebody said, "Oh, what? Like a Babybull course with no rocks or waterfalls?" And I was like, "You know what? That's a good idea. Let me just go ahead and sink this entire course into the ocean, and have these, giant rock waterfalls, just because it kind of gives that same kind of goofy approach to the design that I used with Ilinalta." And so I also wanted to do the floating rocks because, again, another shout out to Sir Larossi. He had another course, Valmar or Valley. I forgot what the name of it was, but he actually had floating rock islands throughout his course. And a couple of them had waterfalls dripping off of them. So I was like, that's something I'm going to kind of play off of too. And except for mine were a lot smaller, and I put like the clubhouse on 18 just because I kind of wanted to have that extra bit of like, this is beyond anything that would happen in the real world, and it's something that's just a little bit goofy and fun to look at. So
Yeah.
that was the idea behind those. But the main thing was that I took it from being somewhat of an actually realistic course. Whenever the whole plot wasn't just water everywhere, it was actually pretty. It was actually going to be one of my most realistic courses as far as land movement was concerned. So I know a lot of golf purists out there are cringing at the thought that this was actually a decent course before I just sank everything and made everything islands. It actually looked really good in sunset and lower lights, but who cares? That's I take a lot of pride in being a little bit off step with a lot of people. So this course is just an example of me not really conforming to the rules that a lot of people put on themselves and the design community as a whole. And it's fun. It's fun to kind of break rules.
So now here's an interesting thing. You say it's fun to break rules. When we see newer designers, I consider myself a newer designer. I've just been around for just over a year. There's this discussion that's about creativity versus realism. Do you need to strike a really good balance between realism and being creative in a course, or do you, for instance, need to create a few very realistic courses first just to kind of get the hang of it? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say the thing I would recommend on most newer designers is to really get good at making your course playable. That's the big thing. So if you can make it to where even though it's kind of crazy fantasy elements, but it plays like a normal course in the game and doesn't have anything that's unfair or any kind of constant lies that are like 45-degree lies on the ground. Like it make it play good for a tournament style golf for most players, and then just add fantasy elements around it. It's going to be a lot better received than if like you make it to where every course or every hole that you come up to is either like a 75-foot or 100-foot drop from the tee, or going up. You're climbing 75 feet or whatever. Like, it's not necessarily something that tour players are going to really embrace, because that's not necessarily a good indicator of skill for a field of golfers, especially in a competition type environment. So that's what I would say is learn more about golf itself and how to get those elements into your course that make it play like a golf course should play, and then kind of take your creativity up from there. That would be my number one recommendation for anybody that wants to go off the beaten path.
Yeah.
If you want to stay on the realistic golf course design path, there's plenty of people to kind of model your approach after in the community. But yeah, I would say that if you want to go off the beaten path, the number one thing is to make it playable and not make it unfair.
Yeah, because it's so easy on a course like this. I mean, we see a lot of different islands here. It would be so easy to have like a par 4 start with a forced carry over water of 270 yards, and then have this tiny bit of fairway, and then create a second shot that's half over water. That's the easy way to go, I would say. Here I think it's harder but not less important to create a course, like you said, that actually plays kind of realistically, even though it's in such a crazy different environment. Thank you so much for letting us all peek into your course design files and for sharing your skills and experience. This was the first episode of the Custom Clubhouses series. If you like what you saw and heard, please hit the like button and, of course, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes of these design talks or any of the other content that I'm putting out. Thank you for watching. See you guys.